Sarah Davis, adventurer, author, speaker, Britain versus the world. Today I have the pleasure of welcoming Sarah Davis as my latest guest. Sarah is an incredible adventurer and explorer, and we're going to dive into some fascinating topics today. We start off by discussing famous British explorers and what inspired Sarah to embark on her own adventures. She shares with us her first expedition, paddling the Nile, and how her background in project management and risk management played a crucial role in her success. Sarah emphasizes the importance of thorough planning and preparation, as well as having a solid understanding of potential risks and how to mitigate them. One aspect that stood out during our conversation was Sarah's encounters with authorities during her expedition, and worse still, being arrested in Burundi for crossing an unmarked border. She shares some eye-opening stories about navigating, being questioned, and surviving certain countries. Sarah explains how she navigated this situation with grace and diplomacy, highlighting the importance of cultural sensitivity, respect, and the value of using subject matter experts in the close protection fields. Another key point Sarah made was the significance of having a strong support system. She talks about the role her advisors played in helping her make informed decisions and manage risks effectively. Sarah emphasizes the importance of surrounding yourself with knowledgeable and experienced individuals who can provide guidance and support throughout your journey. We also touch on Sarah's process of writing a book to process her experiences. She explains how putting her thoughts and emotions into words helped her gain a deeper understanding of herself and her adventures. Sarah shares her mindset of reframing threats into challenges as opportunities for growth and personal development. As we wrap up our sit down, Sarah leaves us with some valuable advice on goal setting and celebrating milestones. She encourages listeners to set ambitious yet realistic goals and to break them down into smaller, manageable steps. She emphasized the importance of acknowledging and celebrating each milestone along the way, as it provides motivation and a sense of accomplishment. So thank you, Sarah, for joining me today and sharing your incredible insights and experiences. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show. And to our listeners, remember to stay tuned for more inspiring conversations coming up on the Straight Talk Mind and Muscle podcast. You can find Sarah at www.sarahjdavis.com. Click on the link below if you're listening and watching on YouTube, and on Insta at Sarah Paddles. And again, the link is there below. Thanks for watching. I'm Damien Porter, former New Zealand Special Forces operator, subject matter expert from hownottoDie.com.au. And you're listening to my Straight Talk Mind and Muscle podcast, sponsored by these guys, mystate.com, the ultimate daily formula for optimum hormone health, stress management, energy, and performance. 100% natural and clinically proven ingredients, it provides everything you need to raise your game in a convenient, gut-friendly capsule. Links for my former shows are in the show notes below. Thanks for watching. And we're live. Welcome to the Straight Talk Mind and Muscle podcast, and welcome to my guest this morning. I can finally say that, Sarah Davis. Thank you for coming on.
Oh, thanks so much for inviting me on your podcast, Damien. It's great to be here.
Oh, it's great to finally connect in person, as it were. Thanks for your patience in organising it. I do the video and audio intro for this, so the people that have listened to that already know your background. But what an amazing thing you've got, Paddle the Nile. Thank you for the book. It's beautiful, and I'm very excited to share your adventurous story. I do have a question. I never really do questions preparation at the start, but I have a question for you that popped up because you and I are here because of Dean Stott, a fellow, I'm only half Englishman. What is it about British people that make them probably the world's best explorers and adventurers?
I don't know. Like, it was funny. I had this conversation the other day, and it was like, why is it the Brits, so many go off, and you look at so many of the sort of like renowned explorers of the past, like a lot are British. I don't know what it is in our DNA that just makes us want to go off and explore different places and see it. But yeah, I think it is a bit of a slight trait.
Oh, it's interesting. Sir Ranulph Fiennes, wrote an intro for Dean's book. I was just thinking there about Ernest Shackleton, but really he was escaping from England, as it were. He was in a bad
Maybe
way.
that's what it is. Maybe that's what we're all doing. We're all running away from it. I don't know.
Oh, look, you've got a phenomenal story, and on your Insta there, you've paddled the Murray River, and you've paddled the Nile. Let's kick off with what got you into adventuring, as it were. What got you outdoors?
Sport, really, I think would be it. I grew up in the countryside in the UK, and I was a real tomboy. My first love when it came to sport was horse riding. So obviously very outdoors, very physical kind of thing. And that was really the start of it, and then nearly all the sports I've done, just sort of having a quick like thinking through in the back of my
Yeah,
head, nearly all of them have been outdoors, whether
right.
it's the team sports at school through to the long distance running, the ocean. I grew up on the pebbly beaches near Brighton, and fell in love with the ocean and spent my summers down there. Like we had, I don't know if you would have seen the little beach huts that they have down in Hove and Brighton, and our
Yep.
family had a couple of those. So my summers were just spent at the beach.
Oh,
Uh,
wow.
and I think that's it. It's where I feel happy. It's what I love doing is being outside. And because I love the sport, I like travel. Again, I don't know whether it's a nature or a nurture thing, but my mother was, she did quite a lot of traveling. When she was younger, she did 6 months traveling around Europe. Now it's a kind of rite of passage almost. But back in those, then it wasn't. It was just her and a girlfriend, and they went off in their car, and mum went to South Africa and lived there for a couple of years, which was really brought up my fascination and desire to go to Africa. It was such a long time before I actually sort of finally got there. And I think just the combination of that love of travel, love of sport, and just love of seeing different places and exploring and trying different things really sparked that love of adventure, which sort of started with more adventure type holidays, and then kind of we did a big leap forward and did an expedition.
What was your first expedition?
The Nile.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
Wow.
go large or go home, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, it was. I mean, I look back at it now, and it's like, wow. It's just when I came up with the idea, I wanted it so much, and I spent years in project management in big sort of corporate in finance.
Right.
I think that helped give me the confidence to sort of go. You start off and you don't know how you're going to do it, and that's okay. And sometimes you might just have some placeholders to go, I need to work out the approvals. It's
Yep.
okay, I'll get to it at some point. And that helped give me the confidence, one, how to structure a plan, and two, to be okay with not having all the answers when you start, just to know that you just got to start taking action, and things will fall into place. And if you believe in integrated powers, it's like that universal will sort of support what you're doing when you start taking action towards it, I think. And particularly when you've got that real passion and drive behind it to do it. So yeah.
Wow. That's so true. Taking action, things falling into place. I'm terrible with quotes when I quote motivational things, but there's something about better to start imperfectly than not to start at all. Something along those lines. If you wait for all to be perfect to start, then you're just stuck.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it reminds me what you've done with, again, with Dean Stott. He would be able to do nothing if it wasn't for Alana, who was amazing at what you're skilled at. You said project management. She was the project manager for his bike ride, and you've got those skill sets prior. So that must give you some kind of as you almost said there, some confidence in, hey, I know how to get things done. Therefore, let's move this direction and let's make it happen.
Yeah, absolutely. Just know that it's amazing what you can achieve and do. It's just having that direction and that sort of end goal to work towards.
Yeah.
A combination of that, and then also having the risk management skills as well. I've worked in risk most of my life. And so much of going on these kind of expeditions is a lot of risk management, working out what can go wrong, the likelihood, the impact, having your mitigants, how are you going to reduce that likelihood or impact, and then potentially where necessary having those action plans. And that also really, really helped, because it helped me unpack where I had knowledge gaps. Like if I couldn't
Right.
assess the likelihood of the impact, or when I looked at the mitigants going, that's still a lot of residual risk in that.
Yeah.
And just being smart about that. So that process really helped. It created boundaries of what I was getting into. It helped deal with a lot of the self-doubt. Yes, that helped drive my preparation, but there was still so much. I mean, I was so far out of my comfort zone. I could not see it. There were so many fears, but understanding all of these things that could go wrong. And I literally had a list. I did a risk register, 110 or so risks in
Wow.
there, split into categories, and it just helped get a reality check on some of those fears as well. I think fears, we take our reality and then we layer on top of it a bunch of assumptions, and our imagination runs wild. It's like I use the sort of the analogy of watching, when I watched Jaws as a kid growing up in the UK, and then I was scared to swim in the English Channel. There are no sharks, or there's no dangerous sharks in the English Channel, but my assumptions and my imagination have gone on wild. But by unpacking all of that kind of worst case stuff and the likelihood and so on, and having then the mitigants and plans in place, it kind of brought it back to sort of reality. So it just got a bit of perspective on those things and really helped give me confidence. And I think it's a very valuable tool for anything new that you're going into, to kind of spend some time doing that kind of work, as well as that planning as well. It's a big part of the preparation.
For success, for a successful finish.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, let's kick off then. Let's talk about the Nile. What was the initial idea that, were you a kayaker originally, and what was your initial idea to paddle the Nile?
Well, yeah, so I've got into, when I moved from the UK, so I moved from London to Melbourne, and then Melbourne up to Sydney. And when I moved up to Sydney, I got involved in the local surf club at North Bondi. Through that opened up all. I mean, it was a very, very pivotal moment. It was, I opened this sort of new door, and it was literally life-changing for many reasons, from the skills I gained, the people I met, the leadership roles I took on, and then most importantly, almost then the sports I got involved in.
Yeah.
Also, I had no idea about growing up. And particularly that surf skis. It's like, skis, no, those are what you put on your feet. What are you talking about, you crazy people? And
I think of Magnum PI when I think of surf ski.
Yeah, well, this is I'd never thought of it as being called. I'd seen that, but I didn't call it a ski. Anyway, so I saw these people doing it. I was like, oh, that looks like fun. So I started the paddling there and did surf, and then ocean. I'm more of an endurance athlete, so I got into the longer distance ocean ski paddling. So when my desire to do this expedition came from wanting change. I'd got to a point in my life where I had a great job. I was working at Macquarie Bank, so that's, for those overseas, that's Australia's sort of biggest investment bank. Great environment, high performing teams. And I was like, look, as corporate, certainly in the fin services space, this is as good as it's going to get. But it still just didn't feel like it was quite me. It was a strength, definitely not a passion. And maybe it was also a bit of a midlife crisis. I was in my mid-40s then, and it was just like I felt like I was settling and staring down the barrel of the sort of 48 weeks of work, 4 weeks of holiday a year was just like, no, was almost feeling claustrophobic.
Right.
And so I wanted change. I wanted to do something different. And so I started reading different things and going through some self-development books, which were good, and watching different things, and came across a couple of adventurers. But what stood out is they weren't, what I always imagined is the ex-military types. They were Bear Grylls, or people you feel have been climbing mountains since they could walk. There were some ordinary people. So, not only was my imagination sparked, it was it made me believe that I could actually do something like that. And it just never occurred to me before. I'd read all the books of adventurers. It just never crossed my mind that I could go and do it. Which is just, you look back and go, that's crazy. But that was the case. And so then I decided, I want to do a big expedition, and my ego liked the idea of it being a first.
Nice.
And just was looking, it's like, what hasn't been done. But I didn't anticipate, and I wasn't looking to do anything to be the fastest. and I saw no woman had done a total source to sea human powered descent of the Nile, and I was like, that's what I was going to aim to do. Spoiler alert, had to miss some sections, and once the ego was sort of taken out of it, I mean, it was so much more than that. It was about the adventure and the challenge and the experience, and you know, everything it took, testing myself and everything it took to make it happen. There were some firsts embedded in there, but that quickly fell away. I think that wasn't a strong enough intrinsic motivation to keep me going, I think.
Wow. Wow. So when you said life changing, I mean, you came to the convict colony all the way from the motherland, Melbourne, a city, and a beach girl. That's so cool, and try new things. I love that. And I think it's a testament to the mindset of people like us. And I say that because you mentioned, you know, you look at these ex-military types like Bear Grylls. Bear Grylls, what an amazing story. I actually read his book about 20 years ago, his first ever book, and he was a nobody, but the mindset of these types of people is just to push yourself, not to try and be better than someone else. It's just to push yourself, right?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I think, and for me, that's always what it's been about. It's not being about being the best, it's about being the best you can be, and having and just exploring different things. I think it's very easy to go, oh, I've done this and I'm kind of good at this and I'll just keep going at that. It's like, no, you know, just be opening new doors and trying new things, because you never know where these things will take you. You know, I didn't join the surf club to change my life. It just happened to do that.
Mm.
And yeah, I think that trying new things and just trying to explore, you know, explore your possible, which is sort of the, you know, the umbrella that I kind of, my messaging is under.
So, did you do the Murray River first, or did you do the Nile first?
I did the Nile first, and then about 9 months after I finished, because I wanted to do an expedition in Australia. I wanted to just make sure I wasn't sort of seen as a, because I wanted to do, you know, this Nile expedition made me come alive like
Yeah.
nothing else ever had. And it's like, or, you know, I found my new drug kind of thing, you know, this is it. I want more of this.
Awesome.
And I wanted to be taken, also to be taken sort of, you know, seriously as an adventurer, and I didn't want to be a one-show pony. So, you know, I wanted to do something else, and it was like, right, I want to do something in Australia. So I did the paddle down the Nile, and then just over a year after finishing that, then cycled across Australia with a friend of mine, sort of swapped paddles for pedals, and cycled across. I'm going back to paddles. Just I'm not. I was like, Dean can have that cycling. Like, what he did is just extraordinary. Yeah, I think I prefer the water-based stuff.
Dean's, that's funny you mentioned that. I've never told this story, I don't think, on video or in public. So the New Zealand SAS, we have a regimental dinner every year, and we have a guest speaker. The guest speaker before I made it through was Sir Edmund Hillary, and in my year was we had Mark Inglis, the double amputee Everest summiter. But long story short, a lot of past, I'll call them warriors, are invited. The warrior sitting beside me was Nancy Wake, so the white mouse.
Oh.
I'm sitting down. I'm a youngish. I call it young now because I'm nearly 50, but I'm a youngish operator, and I was sitting next to an old woman, and I don't know what's going on. And she left to go to the bathroom soon after we sat down, and I asked the doctor across from me. I said, I literally said, who the is this? And she goes, oh, don't you know? And she told me the story about Nancy Wake, and I was stunned, absolutely stunned. Anyway, Nancy came back and she was telling me stories about parachuting behind into France, you know, behind enemy lines, and she talked to me about a bike ride. She cycled for I think 48 hours straight in her dress, and she'd come across some German Nazi patrols and have to get off the side and hide in the ditch, and her dress was getting muddy. And I can't remember if she said she cycled for 48 hours straight or 2 weeks, but long story short, she said, I never got on a fucking bike again, Damien, in my life. And she was in her 20s.
Wow, what an incredible woman. Yeah, I sympathize with.
Oh, and you know, when older people, they made the decision, they drop those the comedic humor is so good, the pause and things. But I never forget it. And I thought Dean must have had a sore bum. What was your body? What did your body go through paddling the Nile, those thousands of kilometers?
Yeah, look, it definitely took its toll on the body, and was constantly having to adapt when necessary. I took with me different paddles, so I had paddles with a smaller blade. So when my shoulders and my back started to really feel it, and also I was on my wrist, it was almost like that constant tugging,
Yeah,
for that pulling through the water. I dropped to a smaller blade size, and that just took some of the pressure off my body. I was popping Mobix, the non-steroidal anti-inflammatories, like they were party pills, right? I've had a lot of those. Um, and it was, what was interesting was when I finished, and I mean, my body just felt like it belonged to an 80-year-old, but it was just that aching in the joints and the walking around. And what I realized, I'd spent so much time, like nearly, for months, basically being non-weight bearing, and your joints just aren't, they're designed to be weight bearing. It's,
yeah,
it's like it brings the lubrication into the joints, and by not being weight bearing, it's, the body just felt terrible. So there was a lot of unraveling, like hip flexors were really short,
yeah.
a lot of kind of atrophy through some of the muscles that I hadn't been using in my legs and my glutes and things like that. So like after every expedition, there's that unraveling and sort of then rebuilding back up and just accepting, going parking all the, I'm not going to be squatting or deadlifting what I was, and that's cool, and let's just build it back up.
Acceptance. I love you said the word accepting there. It's one of those things that you must come to with so many things in life, but acceptance of, well, this is where we're at, and the human body is so beautifully adaptable and can recover so well. It bounces back so well. Can I ask you, what was your feeling, and how big was the team at the start? What were your thoughts, what were your feelings, and surrounded by the team at the start of this expedition? And then we'll go on to at the end.
So I had different teams throughout. I wanted to have local people with me for a number of reasons. One, I think I knew it was going to be a far richer experience, kind of culturally, to do it that way. I needed, from a language perspective, I needed local people with me. I didn't have tons of money or backers to sort of throw at having, paying people to be part of it or anything like that. I had a money, yes, I engaged the local rafting guides to begin with. So, but for me, that made it, a great experience by having the local people with me. And so the first section, which was going to take me from the source in Rwanda to the border with South Sudan, I had hoped to get into South Sudan, but for security reasons, we had to park that one. I had 3 Ugandan rafting guides, so I did a reconnaissance trip to Uganda before fully committing to the trip. Sort of part of my due diligence. I thought, having never been to the countries, having never seen the Nile, I should, say, not get too excited and do that first. And so managed to, build up a bit of a network there to then tap into. I also separately did another recce to Sudan and Egypt, just to sort of see what level of support I was going to get there, meeting with government officials, embassy officials and paddlers. So to begin with, it was myself and 3 Ugandan rafting guides. We were kindly lent the gear by one of the commercial rafting companies in Uganda, Nile River Explorers, and hired a car and a driver, and off we went. There were so many tests from leaving Uganda to get to the start. It just felt like it was that final universal testing of like, do you really want this? Well, I wasn't sure. It's like, am I being tested? Do I really want this? Or is this the universe saying, just don't do this? Because we had
Wow.
car breakdown after car breakdown after car break. Like, it was ridiculous, the issues we had. And then one of our drivers got arrested. I mean, it was, you wouldn't believe if you hadn't done it. You wouldn't, if it had been written, you go, oh, that's silly, that's ridiculous. And I still didn't have the approvals in place. It was literally the day before we were due to go to the source. I finally got the approvals from the Rwandan Tourism Board. And initially we went into the Nwengo forest to the source that I chose, and it's still kind of hotly debated what the source is for the Nile. The one
Oh,
that led
really?
yeah, some say Burundi, some say Rwanda. I think even the definition of what constitutes the source of a river is, I don't think it's been universally agreed. There are some definitions out there. I chose Rwanda, a couple of reasons. One, from a security perspective, certainly at the time, it was safer than Burundi. And in the Nwenge forest, there's a nice wooden green painted sign with yellow writing on it indicating that the muddy pool underneath is the source of the Nile.
Right.
That would be good enough for Leveson Wood, British explorer and adventurer Leveson Wood. It's like, if it's good enough for him, it's good enough for me, right? So we were guided in there, and then it was the next, and got to see that sign, which was a really special moment. I had that on my vision board for 2 years. To suddenly be there in front of it was a very special and a very surreal kind of moment, and quite emotional. So there were lots of happy tears and photos. And then the next day we went to put in on the river. And up to that point, I was still so full of self-doubt and all the fears and that Rolodex of the mind going, have I got enough food? Have I got, because I'm trying to just calculate the food. And then it happened to be food that was appropriate for all the, preparation, how long it would last, and available in Uganda. There was all these little challenges there. And all the equipment, yes, I tested it, but I just felt like all the gear and no idea. It just felt like Bridget Jones does adventuring. It's like, what have I not thought of? What have I missed?
Yeah.
The day that we actually got down and I saw the river and it was great. It was wide enough where we were going to put in and put the raft on. At that moment, all of that kind of worry it just evaporated and then was replaced by this excitement of this sort of anticipation, but oh wow, this is really happening. Like this 2 years of preparation, I'm finally going to get this. My dream's coming true. This is it. And so in that moment, it was just real excitement. It was wonderful as we were setting up. We quickly had a crowd around us of local Rwandans sort of watching this bizarre spectacle kind of being put together as we pumped up the raft and loaded everything on and tied it all down and then launched the raft and we set off. And that moment of just taking that first stroke on the Nile, it's like, wow, I've done it. And crazy as it sounds, like even if it had only been a day, it would have been enough. Like just to have got to that point was massive. And it's like, yeah, okay, this is it. I mean, obviously it went on for a lot longer than that, but it was a really incredible moment.
Thank you for so clearly putting that feeling out there of what it's like to take that first step, because there's so much preparation going. When you're going to go on a mountain or you're going to go on a mission. In the military, you would have done it with your raft, but in the military, you pack and unpack that pack 50 times before you go out, and then it's a relief to put that first bit on the ground, because then it's just up to you, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. It's like you've done all the preparation, you've done all the training. It's now time to trust in all of that, and also trust in your ability to adapt and deal with everything that overcomes. What is it in the military? You say that no plan survives first contact with the enemy, and when it comes to adventuring, no plan survives first contact with anything, really. It's just trusting in you and your team to be able to deal with everything that comes up and sort of flexing with it.
And it's funny you said you were tested so many times prior, when you were going in Sudan and so on. It reminded me of Clarkson, Hammond, and the guys for Grand Tour. They throw themselves into almost impossible situations, and it's funny. You got the comedic value and some of it's put on, but just reminds you of just keep on going. I think the one that we loved the most was watching them go across Mongolia. It was amazing to watch. They just keep on getting it done. Breakdowns happen, and they just roll with it. And like you said at the start, take action, and things will fall into place. I mean, I probably imagine your face the first car breakdown you had, it would have been woe is me, but or the sky's falling. But then on the 5th or 10th, it's just another thing, right?
I think it was almost the other way around. So the first time it's just like, oh, okay, like, oh, these things happen. This is Africa, TIA. Like, how many times did I say that? I lost count. But it was when we broke down and we'd been given this glue to repair the raft with. So if you needed to patch it, you needed a very special glue to be able to patch it. and I've been given this very special glue. And we've been told, basically treated like a baby, not too hot, not too cold, blah, blah, blah. So one of the guys had taken it, put it in the car, and we had broken down again. And I was just listening to my music going, these guys will sort it out. Like, there's nothing I can do about this. It is what it is.
Yeah.
And then I suddenly heard this breaking glass. And mine's going, glass? Like, we haven't got anything. Oh, the glue. And then I watch, and this glue, and I just literally said out loud, fuck the glue. Not in an aggressive way, but in a, fairly impassioned way, which is not really that you get in a way. So I was just like, oh, watching this glue scene, it's like, great, I've got a problem to solve. Here's number one problem that I'm going to have to solve.
Yeah.
But the poor guys, like the driver and his co-driver, like no one in the car spoke for an hour. And one of the guys said to me afterwards, they were absolutely terrified. I'm like, oh, I feel really bad. I feel bad. But it was sort of, there was, emotional roller coaster. There were times of it getting really quite stressful, like, how are we ever going to get there?
Yeah.
Like, this keeps happening, but then just, okay, another problem, we solve it, another problem, we solve it. And we had flat tires, we had breakdowns, like I say, some arrest, and it's just each time it's like, go again.
Yeah. But that's the whole thing. Pick yourself up and go again. Control the controllables, as Ole Ollerton says. You mentioned there with the hotly debated subject of the source of the Nile. What does Guinness say? Because I believe Dean's looking to attempt the kayaking the Nile. What does Guinness say? Do they have any ideas around that?
I don't know what they've said. Like, I didn't look at doing Guinness for many reasons. The proof and everything, and I knew I was going to have to skip sections, like the reality of doing, particularly with the way they say you had to do a river, it's like, way too hard. And like I say, I knew fairly early on, it was way more than, it wasn't about being a world record, and that was fine. I think it's, at some point, I definitely want to try and do something that ends up being a world record, but I knew it was that just fell into the way too hard basket for something that was already very challenging, and my first expedition, and self-organized and self-funded. I did get some sponsors, but the lion's share of it was self-funded.
Yeah, and it's not where I was going about world record wise. I was just intrigued if they had actually ticked those boxes. But I understand exactly what you're saying. Especially in 2023, getting a Guinness World Record is so admin heavy. Your expedition actually harkens me back to, again, Sir Edmund Hillary, but when he teamed up with Rob Hamilton, the inventor of the Hamilton jet, and his son, and their expedition, their journey was to kayak from the mouth of the Ganges. Sorry, not kayak, to go from the mouth of the Ganges to the top of the where it started. So theirs wasn't in debate. What they did, and I don't know if you read the book, amazing book, and Murray Dingle actually was on that expedition, all Kiwis. They got these jet boats up the Ganges and had to portage some of them, sometimes up waterfalls, all the way to the bottom of the mountain, and then put their boots on, and they up the top of the mountain, and actually Edmund Hillary suffered a medical event and had the highest ever medical evacuation at the time by helicopter. But amazing journey going from one place, the mouth of the Ganges, to literally going through villages where they would see hundreds of people turn up just to see these flying boats. What sort of interaction did you see? I mean, you've got Paddle the Nile. I immediately think back to the pyramids and my school idea of Egyptians. What was paddling the Nile actually like with the locals and with what you saw? I mean, that must be a hell of an adventure.
It was, and it was like watching this, story unfolding in front of you. It's a really beautiful and very different way to experience these countries, from a very different perspective. There was always interest in what we were doing. It was, other than when we were in remote areas, generally, people would be coming and sort of saying, what are you doing and why are you doing it? There was always a lot of interest through Rwanda. It's very densely populated. You're never far from people.
Yeah.
Tanzania, and so there'd always be some people at night, sort of coming to see what we were doing, or most nights. Tanzania was a bit more remote, and then through Uganda, again, it was a little bit more populated. We were staying in some of the villages. there was always a lot of interest and questions. But then, yeah, getting to go and spend time in, I mean, overnight at a time. I never had long in these places. But like for one example, in Uganda, each of the villages there has a chairman and effectively an executive.
Right.
So they're there literally sort of to kind of run the village a little bit like not like a company from a for-profit perspective, but deal with some basic law and order and keeping everything ticking over, to be that in between government and the village, potentially implementing some projects and stuff like that. And when you go to a village, you have to check in with the chairman.
Right.
A lot of the time you have to sign like a visitor's book. So we would go in and check in with the chairman. And at one village we stayed at, the chairman very generously invited us to stay in his home. So we were taken to his home, and we were waiting outside, I think, while they were doing some sort of cleaning up and things inside, and had this really kind of cute interaction where he brought his granddaughter over. So the family would come, they were staying quite a way back, and the granddaughter would have been, I don't know, maybe 6 or 7 years old. And he started leading her over, and she just had her hands over her eyes. Like kids do, it's like, I can't see you, you can't see me.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
And so he got about a meter in front of me, and he gently pried her hands away from her eyes, and she just, like, these eyes just went wide, and she looked at me and screamed and like just wrenched her hand and ran away. I was like, oh, it's okay.
Her brain just couldn't comprehend.
Not a ghost. It's like, it's fine, but it's like white blonde hair and everything. So, and then getting to stay in their homes, and they made us dinner and all of that stuff. It was really special. And, obviously the cultures are very different. Because I had to skip South Sudan for 2 reasons. One, I've been keeping an eye on the situation there, but north of Juba, the internal conflict was still, there was so much fighting, it was not going to be possible. I had hoped to get to Juba, but so I'd engaged a company. I did hostile environment awareness training before I went. I looked.
Can you just run? I just missed. You did some what awareness training?
Hostile environment awareness training.
Oh, great! Yes, good.
Training. Very much. It was purely for me, for my expedition. And when I looked at some of the risks and things like unlawful arrest or getting arrested, it's like, I don't know what the stops are. The standard operating procedures for this. It's not available on the web. I don't have a military background.
Yeah.
And for me, the risk was too high and the impact too high. You just see it happening quite a lot, certainly through.
We even just saw it in Mexico just the other day.
Yeah, and it's like, I can't solve this. So I engaged the company that had done my heat training, and I was given an operator who was ex-military, great guy called Dave, who I would then check in with each day, Charlie protocols like 1 to 5 on security, health, mental states, comms situation and supplies. We had the sort of code words on that. So if I was duress, all of those sort of thing. And he would then give me, I'd tell him the plan for the day. He would give me a very detailed intel report, like the detail on the intel reports blew me away. And was there to deal with any crisis that came up. They also had a cyber security team. So they were keeping an eye on people following me on things like social media, we're keeping an eye on online chat rooms, dark web and things like that, because we did have then some people with some history and things like kidnapping talking about me, not in a threatening way, but the fact that you've got those people talking about me is obviously a little bit of a red flag.
Yeah.
So through this, he got the intel that they got was that NIST, the National Intelligence Security Services in South Sudan, were very suspicious about what I was doing. I don't know whether they thought I was a spy or a journal or something like that, which I get, like doing these things for fulfillment on a country which has just been in survival mode for decades. Where they were like, yeah, there's got to be something. Like, why would you do this? And I was told, that I was going to, the intel was that I'd get detained, and we didn't know if that would be for an hour, for a day, for a week. The FCO, like the British embassies, they contacted me after we were arrested in Burundi, and they were just contacting me, checking I was okay and everything, which I was fine. And they said, look, so if anything happens in South Sudan, we cannot help you, and we really do strongly suggest you don't go there. And you just got to you've got to be smart about what you're doing. And it's like the ripple effect of me going there and then something happening like that impacts a lot of different people, including people then coming behind me wanting to do similar adventures and expeditions. And it's like,
Exactly.
it's not worth the risk just for me. It would have been it felt very, very selfish.
Yeah.
So I was like, I had to park South Sudan. So then what it meant was, instead of this sort of gradual moving from country to country, I literally went from, sub-Saharan Africa into Saharan Africa up to Sudan. Suddenly then we're in this, we've gone from this very sort of temperate, more sort of humid environments and lots of vegetation to dry desert.
Wow.
So it was a real kind of jump and a big adjustment. And that's when I started kayaking, which I was so excited to do.
Yeah.
And then, very, very totally different culture. And the people there, I've been told how hospitable and kind like the Sudanese are. And it blew me away, the level of generosity, of kindness. That I was there was a lot of protesting going on. They were trying to get rid of El Bashir after 30 years or near 30 years of his rule. So there was a lot of protesting happening. It was a very difficult time for some of the people there, but yet there was still like the people I connected with on my recce, the paddling community did so much to help make this happen and have people then join me. And so it was them, and then getting to do similar like homestays in Sudan. Just extraordinary experiences.
I'm so glad you talked through that, because as we go, I wrote down a few questions, and the question had next, literally since I came up with How Not to Die, Guy, was safety. And what a clever mindset and, I guess, principles you have around that, which is the same as we have with bodyguarding. We don't want to get in a fight. We don't want you to see that. We have failed in our jobs to some extent if that happens. And really clever for you to engage a professional, really clever for you to look at those things. Did you feel, even in your recce's, was there a time when you felt unsafe, and did you have to do anything about it, or had you already forward planned and managed to be your own bodyguard around that?
Yeah, well, I did Krav Maga training for quite a while, so I was all
Oh,
ready for that, for the fight should it come up.
awesome. Yeah.
Love that. Oh my goodness, it's so much fun. Look, the only time I really ever felt threatened, I mean, even as I say, we were sort of tricked across the border into Burundi and arrested, but at no time did that feel particularly like hostile or threatening. I think it could have turned, absolutely. And I found it a little bit exciting, as I'm putting all my action plans into place. I think I underestimated quite how serious that could have been. There was just one moment where we nearly got arrested in Uganda, and it was just that because we got too close to one of the dams, and they're very, like a lot of these countries, very protective of that kind of
Key
infrastructure,
infrastructure. Yeah.
taking photos, anything like that. And I had taken photos coming into it. So as the guys were getting questioned by the police, while we were waiting for our driver to pick us up to help us portage and get around the dam, I was like surreptitiously like on my GoPro deleting the photos and coughing as it beeps as it was doing.
Wow.
And there was just one guy there, and just the way he was just looking at me in such a kind of, I think, very dark. I felt threatened just by his posturing.
Yes, of course.
I felt like if we are arrested here, I was like, this might not be great.
Yeah.
But we were allowed on our way. Like there were sort of two sets of police. There was the water police and sort of land police.
Yeah.
And the water police, I think, were keen to kind of lock us up. The land police were just like, come on, let's just let them go. And the guys, and when this is another thing about having local guys with me, is that they were able to de-escalate those situations. Like you say, like, don't get in the fight. I don't know, like, the ways to avoid that. And by having local people with me, being able to talk it around, de-escalate it, know when a bribe might be appropriate. I mean, I never did have to bribe on this trip, but it was just having those other people with that skill set that I lacked. So that was the only time I felt really in any way threatened. I think in a lot of ways, actually being a woman on her own sort of created a protective response.
Yes.
By people rather than an aggressive response. And maybe I was just lucky, I don't know, but certainly in the countries I went through, it did feel, and particularly through sort of Sudan and Egypt, quite protective.
Oh, that's great. That's really good to hear, and really, thank you for talking through that that awareness you had of that person and the body language. I interviewed Sean Grogan, a American police officer, and he's a expert in body language, and he's written a book, I believe, uh, talking about pre-fight indicators and trying to see those things before they happen. And as a female, I don't know the stats, but you know, you're massively better at reading body language than we are, because historically and evolutionary, that's what saved you, because you don't want to be in that fight. You want to pick it up a long time before. And what gets me with females nowadays, you decondition to that. You go, oh, you brush that off. But what a clever thing to realize, hang on a sec, he's not looking too good, not looking too flash, and you need to keep away from that. I'd like to go back to the Burundi thing. That sounds like we've brushed over it a couple of times. You got arrested. What happened there?
So that we come down through, we were coming down through Rwanda, and it comes down, it really is right on the edge with Burundi, and it clips the top of this lake, which I can never pronounce properly, Lake Reru, I can never say it. Look at the map, Google map it. And then it carries on into the Akagera River, and there were multiple channels to choose from. Yes, I had a GPS, but obviously it doesn't have the channels, they're always changing. So I said, look, let's ask some of the fishermen. So you had the guys there in the dugout canoes, and two guys were helping us, and then two others came over and took over. And you know, most of these fishermen they're in, you know, rags kind of clothes, right? You know, they're poor as church mice. But in the front of this one canoe, this guy had like nice camo shorts, a nice kind of jacket, and I'm just looking at going, he must be really good as a fisherman. Like, there's something here, like what? But anyway, you sort of just go, okay, he stands out. I wonder what this is all about. So he said, look, come this way. And effectively, he basically led us, because it's an unmarked border, because it's on the edge of this, it's sort of going across the top of this lake.
Yeah.
It kind of led us into Burundi. He said, look, I'm going to call my mates, and they'll show you, you know, which way to go. I'm like, oh, okay, thanks. That's really nice of you. His mates turned out to be the Burundian army. So the next thing we know is that, like, there's
Oh
this
no.
coming across the lake. And so for the non-Aussie New Zealanders watching this, that's a small metal motorboat.
Yeah.
And on the front of it's a machine gun, and then you got the three guys clutching their AK-47s, and you're like, well, they don't look that friendly. So, looking, they asked to see our passports. We've got no plans to be in Burundi, so we've got no visas or anything like that. So then they're like, okay, row across the lake. We want to question you. So as we're going across the lake, then I'm surreptitiously messaging Dave to let him know what's happening. He was the only person who could track where I was. Obviously, I wasn't sharing live what my position was. That would have been way too much of a security risk. So message him, we got across, we got questioned by the army. It was very sort of heart of darkness, because there was all the local villagers. They literally had to set up a call, and you would have had like a couple hundred of the local villagers watching all of this happening. They went through everything. We had to unload the raft.
Oh wow.
They went through literally to the point of new boxes of matches, having to open those and show them what was in there. One moment was quite funny, because we were just the four of us had like piles of gear that we were then going through with one of the guys. So I happened to have my toiletries bag, and they're going through everything. And at one point, they bring out the feminine hygiene products, the tampons, and these the Burundians, they're going, "What's that? What's that?" I had to explain what a tampon was.
Oh no.
Some amusement in an otherwise fairly serious situation. So I spoke to the guy in charge of the army there, and he said, look, it's fine, we'll let you on your way soon. But the police decided they wanted to make something of it, and they wanted to take us for questioning. So they're like, right, we want to take you in. So we had to then deflate the raft. We spent ages kind of cleaning it. It's like, oh, so gee, we might as well clean it, because it was full of mud from the very muddy river. Packed everything up into a flatbed ute, benches on the back, we'll put on the back of it, 4 guards, policemen, and off we go through the Burundian countryside. For about half an hour, we stopped at this village, and I said, look, the guys, it's getting dark, the guys are all in cold, you know, damp gear, can we get changed? Which was true, but my ulterior motive was, I knew I'd be put in a room on my own, and I'd be able to get another message out to Dave to update him on what was happening. So then another hour later, like careering through the countryside, and I just felt like I was being paraded through like some trophy swag. There'd be the odd stop, they'd knock back another beer, and off we go again. They questioned us, like none of this was hostile. It was just asking questions. We questioned some more. They took passports, phones, cameras, all of that. I managed to keep the GPS on me. They said, we're taking you to a hotel for the night, which got me quite excited until I saw it, and then that was like, ooh. We're using the term hotel quite loosely here, aren't we? And we were given like a minute to get our stuff, and I managed to get the satellite phone out and hide that on me and take that with me. So we went
Nice.
to the hotel. And again, I think, had I been a guy, I wouldn't have been surprised if we would have then been put in holding cells, which they did there. So under cover of darkness, I took the room which was sort of at the front with on the like hotel veranda, and literally under cover of darkness, I'm like commando crawling out as best I know how, and putting a call into Dave on the sat phone, like knowing there was an armed guard, like policeman downstairs, but it was like I needed to put that call in, and he was like, don't worry, work's underway, stay calm, stay compliant. And a couple of days later we were released. I kind of felt that they were looking for excuses to keep us, but he done a very good job at getting in front of the right people to help get us out. And so we were then taken back to the border, and we were back into Rwanda, somewhat relieved. And after a couple of days we got on our way again.
You've clearly done your forward planning and got all those systems in place in case things goes wrong. Do you think if you hadn't had someone like Dave there, do you think you wouldn't have got out of this situation as easily or as timely?
Oh, without a doubt. I think it could have been very, very different if he hadn't been there. And also the difference it made was because I came out of that sort of going like, continuing, am I being reckless? Like, I don't know. I haven't got the subjective view or objective view of this. I'm too deep in it. And what it meant was like, well, if Dave was sort of saying, yeah, look, just let the sort of dust settle, spend a couple of days in Kigali, and then just get back on the river further away, it's fine. And just having that sounding board for my decisions, someone who hasn't done something like this before, I don't think he ever said any of my decisions were, no, he definitely didn't, the decision's right, but just having that sounding board to go, okay, right, this is a good decision, and he'd go, yeah, that's fine, yeah, carry on, made such a difference. Particularly, I'm there on my own,
Yes.
but there's no one I can bounce these ideas off with in the same way, and certainly with someone who's got the experience.
Yes.
And it gave me, yes, I think we would probably still be, as I say today, like I'd still be rotting in a cell in Burundi if it wasn't for him. But it really, I don't think I would have necessarily kept going if it hadn't been for having him and that kind of support there.
It's super important you said that. I was just looking for an author of a book, because after interviewing Nick Dunn, one of the Chennai Six, over Christmas, whew, amazing interview. If you want to watch PTSD in action and as someone coming out of that, it's a phenomenal watch. He spent 6 years in a Indian prison. I listened to the audiobook of an Australian SAS guy. He was actually the guy doing the protecting in Nepal at the time. Anyway, long story short, he went out for a little day trip with a mate who, like you said, oh, come meet my mates, with that guy. And they went across an unmarked border, as you said. And they were in India. They were 50 meters inside India. And of course, they got accosted in some way by the Indian police. And they're going, look, it's no problem. We'll just take you back. We'll figure it out. And he spent 28 days in a hellhole. And the British Australian embassy was working it out and doing all the right things. But he wishes to God, and he's a hard an SAS guy. Nick wasn't that. He wishes to God he had just gone, fuck you, and run back 50 meters. Because as a male, it just got worse and worse and worse. The hole got bigger, the case got bigger, and it got to the stage, well, this guy's charging the person and he can't lose face. And like you said, the police came along, want to stick their nose, and the army was good. They're going, yep, you're good to go for your situation, Sarah. But then the police come along, they want to gain face, and you said they were looking for something. And I'm so happy to hear your story, but it wasn't luck. You put yourself, you controlled the controllables in that situation prior, which is beautiful to hear the outcome.
No, thanks. Yeah, and you sort of mentioned control the controls. That was my mantra for that whole expedition, was control the controllables.
Right.
Because there was so much outside of my control.
Yeah.
There was so much outside, and yeah, just that. Like I said, it's that whole preparation and trusting that you've done that. And I was so glad. Obviously that was an investment, having that kind of support, but it was so worth it. And when you hear stories like that of someone who has that military background, like it doesn't, that's not what's going to necessarily save you in those situations.
No.
So yeah, that sounds like a very difficult time for him.
I'll reference the book in the show notes and I'll send it to you, but
Yeah,
it blew me away. We've gone through the feelings at the start, or the preparation. We've gone through some of the without spoiling the book, some of the fun times there. What was your feeling like on success at the end? What was that like? Because you said you're, super almost relieved to get that paddle in the water, and the one day you said would have been enough. What about the end? What was it like then?
it was such a whirlpool of emotions. It really was. There was part of me that was sort of going, oh gosh, there was bits I didn't get to do, and that sort of frustration, and is this really anything significant? Like, I had no perspective on what I'd done or achieved, and it was, again, Dave going, Sarah, this don't focus on what you haven't, focus on what you have done.
Yep.
And when I then clocked it all together in the run up to the end, it was like, oh well, yeah, that was a lot. We covered the 1100 k's of rafting, 3000 of kayaking, all the other adventures and bits and pieces in between, and different types of transport. It sort of started to, sink in. It's like, wow, that was massive. And when I got as close as I could to the end, I couldn't get onto the Mediterranean. That was massive surf there, and just I sort of got to that point of caught it. And it was such a mix of emotions. Like, there was obviously that absolute happiness, I'd done it, I'd got to the end, I'd had this extraordinary experience and adventure, and relief. Like, there was another set of relief at not having to deal with constant uncertainty, constant problem solving, and just managing that. I was so spent by the time I got to the end, physically, mentally, and emotionally. And it's like when you're close to the end,
Yep.
it's the worst. Like, the morning, I only had 15 k's to do. I woke up and I felt so mentally wobbly, like almost on the verge of a sort of breakdown. And I had to look in the mirror and go, Sarah, fucking keep it together. It
Yeah.
was bizarre. When I saw the river, and it was a bit like day one of that, no, it's all good. It's time to bring this to a close. So there was the relief at not, of not having to do this anymore. But then there was also sadness and grief. Like, the Paddle of the Nile had been my life for the 2 years of organizing, and the 6 months I'd been in Africa. Obviously that was on and off. I'd be off the river for a couple of weeks at a time and organize the next section and so on. So there was a sadness. And the day after I finished, I literally flew out the next day. And as the taxi took me over the Nile, I saw the Nile. It was going to be for the last time. And tears
Yeah.
just erupted. And it wasn't this sobbing crying. It was just this emotional outpouring of everything, all of that and so much more. And it was like I was trying to pinpoint, like, what is it? And it's like, no, there is so much at play here, and just let it be, and this is it. So it was interesting. And I know a lot of people talk about post expedition blues, which I never got. And I think for a couple of reasons. One, there was a lot of relief there, and just I was happy to get back to some normality and a bit of structure and routine. But I also knew that I was going to be going on more expeditions.
Yeah.
Like, this was not going to be the end of it. This had made me come alive in a way that nothing else had. So, that what I was looking for when I started in the search for this idea, I'd found it. I'd absolutely found it. Unfortunately, what I found is something that costs money and doesn't make you money. We're still working on that, as how to make this a profit-making situation. But yeah, I knew that I'd be going on more, and that just, there was a level of excitement of going, okay, there's going to be more, and I'm going to write a book about this. Like, I knew after the first 3 weeks, it's like, well, we've got enough for a book, even if nothing else exciting happens. So yeah, so it was mixed emotions.
I can imagine so many things. One of the things that comes to mind with me is, um, oh, it's done. It's because you're just putting one foot in front of the other. In your case, sorry, one pedal in front of the other, and like it, oh, now it's done. It's over. There's is that it? Is some of it as well? But man, your sense of grief and loss, of saying goodbye to the Nile, your constant companion for all that time, um, and also knowing that you're going to be going back to other things that have that feeling, that have that purpose, would be really empowering. And then you went on to write a book.
Yeah, yeah, which was another interesting program, sort of project. And I think from an endurance perspective, it's probably been the hardest one I've done.
Wow.
But it was so worthwhile. I think it's so easy to sort of go tick next,
Yeah.
and certainly, you know, the type A personality, that's what it's all about. And you really miss out on extracting all the juice and the learnings and the lessons and the toolkits to take forward. I think also, as certainly as a woman, we often downplay our achievements, and we, you know, that's what we're kind of taught to do. Oh, it was nothing, it was nothing. And it's like you rip yourself off. You
Yeah.
actually rip yourself off. You know, it's not about chest beating and going, hey, look what I did, I'm amazing. But acknowledging, like, that was tough, that was hard. You know, like David Goggins says, you know, it's you're callousing the mind, and you're filling the cookie jar, and the cookie jar's reminding yourself of all those things you did and overcome. And if you play them down, like, you're not really filling, you're just putting in little baby cookies when they're really like that big damn big
Ah,
cookie.
clever analogy. Yeah.
And it's like, and so by doing the book and doing all of that really helped process it all and try and get the most out of it. And I think that was, it was a really valuable process. Like when I finished the cycle ride with my friend Tara, we both said, like, you know, a lot of stuff happened on that. And it's like, we need to do that reflection. Like, you know, maybe one day there'd be a book in it, or we talk about doing a book together. But it's like, we must, you know, individually go and spend that time unpacking it. And we didn't, we just got back into life. And it was like, oh, there's all that gold in there. We've, you know, we could still go, you know, I can still go back and do it. I've got all my vlogs and my diaries, and I've ripped myself off a lot more that I could take out of that experience.
Really interesting. You said process. I was actually waiting for you either to bring it up, or if I could, because you talked about the post expedition blues, and you really had some ups and downs with that, with paddling the Nile. And I was going, but you're mentally in a great state from what I can tell here, and you said some almost psychologist sort of words there, and I was wondering how you'd process that trauma. And trauma doesn't mean you see some guy turn into pink mist in front of you. Trauma could be a guy shouted at you. It's that person's take on the trauma. And that then tells me, by writing the book, you processed all that pain and suffering you went to, and hardship, and taken that emotion out. You've fired it off that amygdala into the or wherever the hell else it goes in the brain. But you've done the right thing. So what a clever way of processing it, by writing the book, and of course writing something so good.
Oh, thank you, thank you. Yeah, it was, as I said, valuable process, and otherwise it's all kind of stuck in there, and you don't really make any sense of it. And
Yeah.
it make sense of a lot of the things, and then really help fuel me to go on and do more and bigger and better things.
It's so important to process those things. You doing that awesome expedition is no different than a person now doing a mission for 3 months, 6 months, whatever you've got to do. But you've got to process it out. And I mean, my show isn't a veteran podcast. I just happen to have high achievers that have many veterans on it. A lot of the special forces guys, and you've got to process that out. I'm lucky enough I get to speak to older veterans, sergeant majors we spoke about earlier, and people like Dean, 20-year veterans. We're at the stage now, we know we need to communicate to process those things, and it's super important. I guess that then brings us to where to now for Sarah. That's the next thing on the books? What's going on for 2023?
So I've been, because I wanted to, break out of corporate. So I finished my last contract in banking last June, published a book in July, and now sort of establishing myself as a speaker, doing some more writing, but more sort of blog type writing, and coaching, moving into that exec coaching and individual coaching space. So getting that going at the moment, and I just need to get enough momentum happening there for me to go off and do my next expedition. I've got such a long list of things I want to do. It's sort of working out the timing of them. Like the plan had been to do a source to sea of the Missouri, Mississippi, but I'd need to kick that off in June to do that. And I
Right.
just, unfortunately, I can't see myself having a strong enough foundation in my business to kick that off then, which is a bit of a shame. So then it's looking at what's next. I've got some, I mean, there's so much. I want to row an ocean. I'd like to do a source to sea on each continent. I've got some ideas of a sort of a trans-global, multidisciplinary expedition I really want to do, which would be over a number of years. So it's yeah, just sort of working out timing wise, money wise, and everything else. But I'm missing it. You know, it's, for me, it's like 2021 was the last time I did an expedition,
Yep.
and I'm just
Yeah. Get the itch.
itching to get. I'm like, oh, I've been doing a bit of competing to try and, you know, sort of give me those goals to work towards, those sort of physical goals on the surf skis and stuff. But it's like, no, I need my next big thing. You know, I need that hit again. So yeah, just sort of playing around with some ideas. But you know, if there's anyone out there looking for an adventure to come with them and they've got some good ideas, let me know.
I'm sure there's a few on in this network. I must hook you up with Radix Nutrition, who actually, now you've said that, probably
Oh
could
yes.
connect you. Radix Nutrition, I got some of their stuff, which is great, and now New Zealand SAS guys and operators are getting it. But the reason I thought of you was they had some crazy Russian, in their words, some crazy Russian rower do this. It was not achievable expedition or adventure, and he did it. They did it all on their meals. So I must connect you with them. I love that you're doing a well trodden path from the past adventurers we spoke of that I think people forget about now. I, as you said it, I remember Ed Hillary coming back. I'm sure that the expedition manager organised a speaking tour on that probably started to pay for the trip in arrears. That's really good that you really clever that you're getting out there as a speaker from such a great adventure. I think that's a perfect position to put yourself in.
Yeah, and I really, you know, it's around, you know, under the banner of Explore Your Possible, you know, whether it's in corporates and teams and performing at their potential, or individuals, and just, you know, it falls under that, using the stories from the expedition of dealing with adversity, how to, you know, go
Mm.
after it, you know, set and attain big goals and deal with the challenges, and the mindset to do, you know, needed to do them, to keep going, the grit and the perseverance, and learning how to thrive outside of your comfort zone. You know, I think we get so sort of conditioned that we should be looking for comfort, and that's like it's not what we should be looking for. And I'm sure you'd be in agreement of that. You know, it's getting out of the comfort zone and challenging ourselves, and seeing what we're capable of. And that's what all my kind of messaging is through the speaking I do.
Well, I'm glad that we've gone there because that was kind of how I want to tie this in a bow. Somehow I managed to pluck it together through through the start and into the end. My last one for you, Sarah, was mindset ideas and advice, and you've said that's what you do, which is great. So, thinking about the listener and the viewer here, what sort of mindset ideas, advice could you give them? Because you're not just one human in the world that can do this. Many other people are there, and that's what you coach and speak to. So, what would you like to leave them with, or some ideas there?
Oh, look, I think there'd be a few. It's, you know, for one, I think certainly going after these big things, it's how to take the overwhelm out of it. I think sometimes it can look, you know, when you're looking up at the mountain, you're like, oh my God, that's such a long way. And it's bringing it down into a, you know, how far in the future you can see that isn't overwhelming. And sometimes that might be just taking the next stroke. But
Yes.
it's amazing, like that one stroke, and that one stroke adds up really, really fast to quite a long way. Looking how far you've come, when you're looking up at the top of the mountain, it can still seem like such a long way. But when you look behind at how far you've come, it's like, oh wow, I've done a lot. You know, through my planning through those 2 years, there'd be times I'd be like, I'm just not getting anywhere. And then I'd look at what I'd actually done, you know, and I keep a record of it all. I'm you know, about these things, of all the things I've done in the last week and the last month. It's like, wow, that's a lot. And it
Yeah.
never ever failed to motivate me to keep moving forward. So I think, you know, that is one, is take the overwhelm out. see how far you've come, celebrate the process, celebrate the process, celebrate the milestones, break it down. Because again, if you're just looking at the end result, it's just too much. Like you've got to break it down into those smaller pieces and celebrate. It's not about throwing a party, but even if it's just an internal high five of like,
Yep.
yeah, I got that done, breaking things down into small bite-sized chunks. If you go, oh great, I've got to build a website, and it's like, well, you're never going to start that because it's massively overwhelmed. Go, okay, let's decide on the domain name, let's
Yep.
decide on posting, let's decide on the menu skeleton. You just break it down into things that you can fit in for half an hour or an hour. So I think some of those things really helped. The other one I really like, which I did get from watching a TED talk from someone, a retired Navy SEAL, was the concept of threat or challenge.
Mm.
Whether you view something, obviously, if you're viewing something as a threat, your physiological and cognitive and physiological approach is very different. The blood's going to your core, your
Yes.
mind, you're not thinking that
Shutting
clearly,
down your brain.
fields, everything's kind of shutting down, you're on the back foot. When you see something as a challenge, you're on the front foot, the blood's pumping to your muscles to get you ready to deal with the challenge, and cognitively you're going to deal with it a lot better. So trying to reframe a situation and go, I need to see this as a challenge. I was very scared of the rapids because of a near drowning experience a long time ago. So when I was coming into the rapids, it's like, it's a challenge. So
Yeah.
reframe it as a challenge, and like, you're like, come on, let's do this, as opposed to letting myself go into the threat mode. And that, there were times when it was just like, no, I couldn't do it. I went massively into threat mode, but and I think it's something to practice. But those were just a few of the things that helped me and that I've taken sort of forward.
And they are huge, literally. In that 3 minutes you're speaking, those things are pure gold. I'll pull it out as a trailer for the show. And in the special forces, we do all those things. We look at one step in front of the other just to get to lunch. The SEALs are classified, just make it to breakfast. Get out of bed and make it to breakfast. Okay, make it to lunch. But what a clever way you put there, defining if you see something as a threat. We like to call it the amygdala flip. You flip your lid, all the brain thinking's gone, and you're just screaming. If I was like that when I went to jump out of a plane, you're going to see my finger marks in the metal. But I'm thinking about do this step, do this step, do this step, and we're there. It's beautiful, very, very. You do it in a nice Crown way that I can understand, which is great. Well, absolutely stunning talking to you, Sarah. Thank you. I'll just end with Sir Peter Blake. Rest in peace. He was one of the greatest adventurers for me. And he correlates with what you were saying. And he says, the hardest part of any journey is to begin, taking that first step. And I love that you put that there, just one step over and over and over can mean so much, get you so far, and acknowledge it, look back at how far you've come. Sarah, it's been beautiful to speak to you. Thank you so much for your time. I'll put everything that we spoke about, any links and things in the show notes. Where do people find you? Where's the best way to connect and more importantly, get your book?
Okay, so I've got my website, sarahjdavis.com, and that's DAVIS, so that's the website. Social media, I'm probably most active on Instagram, so that's Sarah Paddles, all one word. And the book is on Amazon, so wherever you're getting that from, or you can get it directly from me if you want a signed copy, and you can get it from Amazon in paperback and Kindle version. So thank you for letting me plug that. Much appreciated.
You're most welcome. That's the book right there. And of course, like I said, I do a video intro and an audio intro to that, so it'll be right at the start as well. And the links are there for you guys listening. Thank you, Sarah. It's been beautiful to speak to you. Absolute pleasure. Congratulations on what you've done, and best for what's to come.
Oh, thank you so much. I really enjoyed the conversation. Thanks so much, Damien.
Oh, you're welcome. Okay. Hi. Thanks for watching. I'm Damien Porter, former Special Forces operator, and check out my new project for 2023 at hownottodie.com.au, where I've combined all my Special Forces training and police officer experience to help others. Thanks for watching.